Picture this, April 1945. The Reich is burning itself to ash, and the roads of Germany are clogged with surrender. But thousands of miles away, in the quiet heart of the American Midwest, a convoy of trucks hums across the prairie, carrying a different kind of wreckage. Young women who once wore the eagle and swastika on their sleeves, now bound for a land they had only known through propaganda posters and nightmares. The prairie wind cuts cold through the canvas of the truck. The women sit huddled, their gray field coats buttoned to the neck, Wehrmacht issue still clinging to them like a past that won't wash away. They are auxiliaries, clerks, typists, radio girls, captured when the Western Front finally collapsed. Some were taken at airfields, others at command posts that no longer had radios to command. They had followed orders, not glory, and now they are cargo. A young woman named Liesel presses her forehead against the metal wall, feeling the vibration of the road beneath her skull. She is 24, from Munich, her hair tucked under a wool cap that smells faintly of smoke and sweat. She hasn't seen her family since the bombings began. The girl beside her, barely 19, clutches a rosary she pretends not to believe in. Her name is Anneliese. Every time the truck hits a bump, the wooden beads rattle softly like teeth. They do not know where they are going, only that they are going somewhere safe. That word, safe, feels both shameful and sweet. To survive a war one's country started, was that safety or surrender? Through the slits in the canvas, they glimpse something that confuses them. Farms untouched by bombs, golden silos, telephone poles stretching endlessly into blue. It is not the America they imagined. There are no ruins, no beggars, no fear. Only space, and a kind of peace that feels insulting. When the trucks finally stop, a corporal opens the tailgate and shouts something in English. The words are strange, but his tone is ordinary. No cruelty, no bark of authority. The women climb down slowly, boots sinking into spring mud. Before them rises a new compound. Wooden barracks surrounded by barbed wire, a water tower gleaming in the sun, and an American flag flapping lazily overhead. The guard tower is manned, but the rifles are slung casually. The Americans seem relaxed, almost indifferent. The prisoners exchange looks. They've been told Americans hate them, that captivity means humiliation, perhaps worse. Yet here, the air smells of clean pine and coffee. Greta, 32 and broad-shouldered, used to cook for officers in France. She stares toward a building at the far end of the camp where smoke curls gently from a chimney. Her stomach clenches. For weeks, she has lived on barley soup thin as fog and bread black as coal. Hunger has long replaced pride. But she keeps her chin high. She was once the one feeding others. An American sergeant steps forward with a clipboard. He's young, maybe 23, his accent rolling and light. The interpreter beside him, a German-American corporal, calls out names from the roster. Each woman answers stiffly, still clinging to the clipped discipline drilled into them by an empire that no longer exists. Inside the barracks, everything feels wrong. Clean bunks, sheets, a stove that actually burns, tin cups stacked neatly on a wooden table. There is even a smell, warm, salty, almost sweet, that none of them recognize. It creeps into their nostrils, maddening and inviting. Liesel glances toward a narrow window. Outside, 2 American soldiers sit on overturned crates, eating from metal trays. She can see steam rising from the food. One of them laughs, saying something about spam and eggs. The other swallows, nodding with satisfaction. Spam. The word sounds ridiculous to her ears. She mouths it silently, spam. She has no idea what it means. Anneliese's stomach growls audibly, and she flushes red. Greta notices and forces a smile that doesn't quite hold. "Don't worry," she whispers. "They'll feed us soon. Even if it's pig slop, it'll be warm." The door creaks open. A guard enters, gesturing for them to follow. They file into the mess hall, a long, wooden building alive with clatter and smell. Rows of tables stretch beneath hanging bulbs. Sunlight filters through the high windows, striking the steel trays laid out in perfect rows. And then they see it. On each tray sits a slice of bread, a scoop of yellow eggs, and a glistening pink slab of something that looks halfway between meat and mystery. It quivers slightly under the light, its edges browned from the griddle. Fat sizzles in pans at the far end of the hall, sending out the unmistakable perfume of salt and grease. A ripple of laughter breaks out among the women. Liesel covers her mouth, whispering to Greta, "Das ist Hundefutter." That's dog food. Others repeat it, mocking the strange pink meat. Even Anneliese laughs, though her ribs ache from hunger. The American cooks, busy behind the counter, glance up briefly, then return to their work. No reaction, no anger. Just the rhythmic scrape of spatulas, the hiss of frying. Narration might note, if this were film, that the camera would linger on the absurdity of it all, the defeated mocking their captors' food while their stomachs gnaw with emptiness. The laughter has an edge to it, part pride, part denial, part desperate clinging to superiority. But then something unexpected happens. The first tray is placed before Liesel. She stares at it, inhaling the aroma. The eggs are soft and steaming, the bread thick and fresh. The pink meat glows faintly in the light like polished copper. She lifts her fork, hesitates. Greta watches, arms crossed, defiant. Outside, a bird calls somewhere beyond the barbed wire. The sound is sharp, clear, free. Liesel closes her eyes and takes a bite. It is not dog food. The salt stings her tongue, the fat melts across her palate, and the warmth spreads downward, hitting her chest like fire in winter. Her throat tightens, not from taste but from memory. Home, before the war, when her mother cooked bacon she'd smuggled from the butcher. For a moment, the barracks, the defeat, the shame, all vanish. When she opens her eyes, the laughter is gone. Around her, the other women eat in silence, eyes down, mouths full. Pride has given way to something quieter, heavier, realization. Anneliese puts her fork down and whispers, "It's good." Greta doesn't answer. She just keeps eating, slow and steady, tears glistening along the rim of her nose. Across the hall, an American sergeant glances over. He doesn't understand the words, but he understands the silence. He nudges the corporal beside him and mutters, "Guess they like it after all." The camera would hold here, on that silence, a fragile, almost sacred moment between former enemies, bound not by politics or victory, but by something older and simpler, hunger. For the first time, these women taste what it means to be fed, not punished. The food on their plates isn't just nourishment, it's proof. Proof that mercy can exist even in the shadow of war. And as the narrator's voice would lower into a thoughtful hush, we'd leave the scene with one quiet line. They came to America expecting judgment. What they found that morning was breakfast. The morning after their arrival, the camp stirred awake beneath a thin veil of fog. Crows circled above the guard towers, and the flag on the pole outside flapped lazily in the prairie wind. Inside the barracks, the German women stirred from their bunks, still wrapped in wool coats that smelled of the Atlantic voyage and unwashed skin. Sleep had not come easily. Some had wept quietly, others stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of a generator that seemed to whisper foreign promises. Safety, routine, food. Liesel sat upright on her bunk, rubbing her arms to warm herself. Her stomach growled, a familiar ache, though somehow different now. It was no longer the hunger of war, of scarcity and fear, but of uncertainty. Hunger in captivity was a strange companion. It reminded you that you were still alive. Greta, sitting on the edge of the next bunk, tied her hair back with a string of gray cloth and muttered, "If they serve us more of that pink stuff today, I'll feed it to the crows." From outside came the sound of metal on metal, the clang of pans. The scent arrived first. Eggs again, but stronger this time, mixed with something smoky and sweet. The women exchanged glances. No guards yelled, no dogs barked. Only the rising hum of breakfast. They lined up outside the mess hall under the gaze of two American sentries. One of them, a young man from Iowa, chewed gum and tipped his cap politely as they passed. The small gesture made Greta's jaw tighten. Kindness felt dangerous. It made hatred harder to hold. Inside, the hall was warm. Steam drifted from the kitchen like fog rolling off a river. The women shuffled along the counter where American cooks, sleeves rolled high, ladled yellow eggs and scooped a new slice of the mysterious pink meat onto each tray. The cooks talked among themselves, their accents lilting and strange, carefree in a way that made the prisoners uneasy. Liesel took her tray with both hands. "Spam," one of the cooks said, tapping the tin beside him. "Specially processed American miracle." He grinned, as if delivering a joke he'd told 100 times. Liesel nodded uncertainly, not understanding, but the words stuck in her head like a song lyric she didn't like. At the long tables, the women sat together in small clusters. Some whispered in German, others poked at the food with dull forks. The spam glistened under the lamps, glistening pink with browned edges. To the women who had known starvation and sawdust bread, it looked both obscene and luxurious. Anneliese wrinkled her nose. "It shines like metal," she said. "It's not real food." Greta smirked. "Americans eat machines, perhaps. Look at their cars. They even make food from factories." A few laughed, quietly, bitterly. Their pride was all that remained, and even that felt borrowed. Across the hall, Sergeant Mills watched them from his corner post. He was 22, a farm boy turned guard. To him, they didn't look like enemies. They looked like tired women his mother might have hired to peel potatoes. He nudged his friend and muttered, "Guess they don't like spam either. My ma says it's the taste of victory. They say it's dog food." The corporal beside him chuckled. "Ain't wrong." The laughter from the guards mingled with the murmurs of the prisoners, a strange harmony of misunderstanding. Liesel pushed her fork through the soft pink slice. It bent, bounced, refused to break. "See," she said softly. "Rubber." But the smell, God, the smell was irresistible. Salt, fat, smoke. It awakened something deep, primal. She took a small bite, almost in defiance of herself. The taste was rich, almost too rich. Her stomach clenched, as if confused by abundance. Anneliese watched her carefully. "Well," Liesel swallowed, her eyes glistening. "It's different." She wanted to say more, but the words wouldn't come. The others waited for her verdict, forks hovering in air. Then Greta, stubborn and proud, declared, "Das ist Hundefutter," and the hall erupted with laughter. For a moment the tension broke. Laughter bounced off the wooden walls, sharp and echoing. It was the laughter of people who needed to remember who they were, if only for a breath. But behind the counter, an American cook, an older man with a paunch and a wedding ring, heard the words and grinned faintly. "Dog food, huh?" he said to his assistant. "My dog back home never ate this good." He scooped another portion onto a tray. "Guess they'll figure it out." The humor in his tone wasn't cruel, it was patient. And somehow that made it sting more. Liesel lowered her gaze. The laughter faded. Around her, spoons scraped metal trays. Pride began to taste like ash. She took another bite, slower this time, and something in her eased, the warmth spreading outward again, the body remembering what nourishment felt like. Outside, the sun broke through the fog, spilling white light across the yard. Through the window, the women could see Americans eating the same meal, spam, eggs, bread, and coffee. No better, no worse. The realization rippled through the room like a current. There was no hierarchy here, just mouths to feed. The narrator's voice would linger here, in the silence between bites, explaining how the War Department had mandated equal rations for prisoners and guards alike. 3,500 calories per day, carefully measured and documented. The intention was simple, to show the world that democracy didn't starve its enemies, it converted them. Liesel didn't know that. None of them did. But they could feel it. Anneliese leaned closer, whispering, "Maybe they want us to get fat before they send us home." Greta shook her head. "No. They want to shame us. Feed us like pets." But even as she spoke, she was chewing. The spam was already half gone. By the time the meal ended, the hall smelled of grease and quiet reflection. The guards collected trays. One of them, Mills, paused beside Liesel's table and said something in English, motioning toward her untouched bread. She hesitated, then nodded. He smiled faintly and left, his boots clicking softly on the wooden floor. Liesel stared after him, confused. No sneer. No hatred. Just civility. It unsettled her more than cruelty ever could. As the women filed back toward the barracks, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of cooked meat. Greta muttered, "Their food is too heavy." Liesel said nothing. Her hands trembled, not from hunger now, but from realization. These men didn't see them as monsters. They saw them as human. The thought terrified her. That night, as the generator hummed and the stars spread like frost across the sky, she lay awake replaying the day's sounds, the sizzling on the griddle, the clatter of forks, the laughter that had died too soon. In the distance, a train horn wailed, long, mournful, foreign. Liesel closed her eyes and thought of home, of ration cards and cold soup, of her brother who had vanished on the Eastern Front. Then she remembered the taste of the pink meat, how it had melted like a secret she wasn't ready to keep. Perhaps defeat didn't come all at once. Perhaps it came bite by bite. Outside, the flag rustled in the prairie wind. And somewhere deep inside her, pride began to collapse, quietly, almost mercifully, beneath the weight of one small, greasy miracle. Morning settled over the camp like a new season, soft, indifferent, almost forgiving. The frost had melted from the barbed wire, leaving thin threads of dew that sparkled in the pale sun. Inside the barracks, the women woke to the smell of coffee and bacon grease, a scent that belonged to another world entirely. What had once been a taunt now felt like an invitation they didn't know how to answer. Liesel sat on her bunk, holding a metal cup between her palms. The warmth seeped into her skin, loosening something in her chest. The first sip was bitter, black, and shockingly rich. It burned her tongue. She winced, then smiled faintly, the first smile since capture. Anneliese stirred beside her, still half asleep, her hair tangled. "You smile like a fool," she murmured. "Maybe I am," Liesel replied softly. "But at least a warm fool." Greta rolled over on the top bunk, muttering, "Don't get used to it. They're fattening us up to dig their fields." Her voice was flat, but her eyes betrayed her curiosity. Every morning, the guards brought something new: peaches in syrup, potatoes with butter, even thick stew that smelled faintly of paprika. It made no sense. Defeated prisoners, treated like guests at some humble inn of mercy. Outside, a bell clanged for morning work detail. The women were assigned to small tasks: laundry, kitchen duty, cleaning barns that had been turned into storage shed. Under guard, yes, but loosely. There were no screams, no dogs, no rifles pointed close to their back. The guards spoke little German, yet their gestures were polite. Some even nodded when passing, as though greeting equals. It was not the captivity they'd feared. It was stranger, a kind of quiet dignity. By mid-morning, Liesel was scrubbing a row of tin trays beside the kitchen's open window. The spring air carried the scent of soil and something faintly sweet. She paused, watching through the glass as Sergeant Mills, the young guard, leaned against the wall, peeling an apple with a knife. His motions were slow, almost meditative. When he caught her looking, he smiled and offered the apple through the window. She hesitated, unsure whether it was mockery or kindness. "For me?" she asked in halting English. He nodded. "For you," he said simply, and placed it on the sill. Then he walked away. The apple was bright red, its skin flawless. Liesel picked it up, half expecting a trick, but there was none. She took a bite. The taste flooded her mouth with sugar and sunlight. It was absurd, an apple making her want to cry. She hid her face in her sleeve, ashamed of how easy it was to be moved. Greta saw the gesture from across the room. "Careful," she said quietly. "They give food, not freedom." Liesel wiped her eyes. "Maybe they give both," she said. "Just not the way we expected." That afternoon, the women worked in the vegetable garden outside the fence, under watch but unchained. The soil was rich, dark as chocolate, nothing like the dust of the Reich's starving farms. They pulled weeds in silence, the hum of distant tractors echoing through the hills. Occasionally, an American truck rumbled past, its bed filled with crates marked "Rations, U.S. Army." Greta squinted at the labels. "They drown in food," she said. "Even their prisoners grow fat. No wonder they can afford mercy." Liesel brushed dirt from her hands. "Mercy isn't what you afford," she said quietly. "It's what you choose." Anneliese laughed softly. "You talk like a poet now. Next, you'll say you love them." Liesel didn't answer. She didn't know what she felt, only that every meal, every gesture of civility, stripped something from her armor. The enemy had stopped being faceless. He had become young, tired, and human. Later that evening, when dinner was served, the hall glowed with amber light. The same spam and eggs returned, but now no one mocked it. The women ate slowly, deliberately, as though the act itself carried meaning. Conversation drifted softly, memories of home, of lost brothers, of hunger so deep it blurred dreams. Across the room, Sergeant Mills stood near the door, his expression unreadable. He'd begun learning fragments of their language. Guten Abend, Danke, coffee? Little words that made the distance smaller. When he refilled Liesel's cup, their fingers brushed. Neither spoke. The silence between them was its own strange truce. The narrator would have paused here, letting the camera linger on faces once hardened by ideology, now softened by simple decency. Food had become more than sustenance, it was conversion. A lesson taught not by sermon or sword, but by salt and smoke. Historical reports later confirmed this odd truth. America fed its prisoners by the book, 3,500 calories a day, the same as its own soldiers. Red Cross inspectors noted that many German POWs gained weight during captivity, their health improving even as their homeland collapsed. To a nation raised on ration cards and propaganda, this was unthinkable. The Reich had starved, the enemy had shared. Liesel wrote about it weeks later in a confiscated notebook. Her words, translated after the war, still carry the tremor of revelation. We were treated as humans again. I did not know how to bear it. Greta, who once cursed the Americans under her breath, began asking for recipes from the cooks. One afternoon, she helped slice onions for stew and laughed when the smell made her cry. "Tears," the cook said, handing her a towel. "Best seasoning." She didn't understand his words, but she understood the tone. Anneliese, still the youngest, found herself sketching faces in the dirt, smiling soldiers, not monsters. When Liesel asked why, she shrugged. "Because it's easier to draw the world when it's not burning." But at night, when the lights dimmed and the generator hummed, the conflict returned. They were still prisoners. Their homes were still rubble. The warmth of food couldn't erase the image of a nation in ruins. Mercy, they realized, could be heavier than cruelty. It forced them to confront guilt. One evening, as they left the mess hall, Greta stopped to look back at the kitchen door, where the smell of fried meat still hung thick. "It's strange," she said, "to feel thankful to your captors." Liesel looked toward the fence glinting in moonlight. "Maybe we're all captives," she said. "Some of hunger, some of hate." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of lilacs from beyond the wire. It was spring again, undeniable and alive. That night, sleep came softly. But for the first time, Liesel dreamed not of bombs or sirens, but of her mother's kitchen, of bread rising in an oven and her father laughing over coffee. Only the uniforms were different now. The laughter came in English. When she woke, the dawn was quiet. The bell hadn't rung yet. She sat up slowly and looked out through the slats of the barack wall. Beyond the fence, Sergeant Mills was standing alone, lighting a cigarette. He looked up and saw her silhouette, and for a moment, they simply stared across the thin divide of wire and war. He raised his hand in a small salute, then turned and walked away. Liesel's heart thudded in her chest, not from affection, but from understanding. The war inside her was ending too, and somewhere deep within that stillness, she realized what the pink meat and bitter coffee had really been all along. Not just food. Not even mercy. It was proof that the world she'd been told to hate was capable of feeding her back to life. The prairie summer came quietly, softening the mud roads into golden dust. The days stretched longer now, filled with the rhythmic clang of hammers and the scent of cut grass drifting across the wire. Time, in the camp, had changed shape. The German women no longer counted it by days of captivity, but by meals, by the smell of frying fat that marked the passage of morning, by the sweet coffee that ended the evening. Food had become the measure of peace, each spoonful an unlikely truce between pride and hunger. Liesel stood near the garden one afternoon, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, tending to rows of beans. The soil was warm against her palms. Her skin had darkened, her frame filled out. She no longer looked like a prisoner, and yet she still flinched when the wind carried the echo of boots or shouts from afar. The war wasn't over in her mind. It lived in small corners, in the twitch of her hand when thunder cracked or when a plane passed overhead. Anneliese knelt beside her, pulling weeds. She hummed an old lullaby, the same one she used to sing to her brother before he was conscripted. When Liesel glanced over, she saw that Anneliese was smiling. "What's funny?" "Nothing," she said. "Just we're alive. I didn't think I'd smile again." Greta, standing behind them, wiped her brow with the back of her hand. "Don't let them hear you say that," she muttered. "They'll think we've forgiven them." Liesel pressed a seed into the dirt. "Maybe we have." Greta scoffed. "Forgiveness is for the powerful. We lost that right." But as the afternoon light broke across the fields, Greta's voice softened. The truth was, she no longer hated the Americans. Not after what she'd seen. The careful hands bandaging Anneliese's blister, the guard who carried buckets of water for them without complaint, the cook who smiled each time he served them breakfast, saying "same for me," as though they shared the same table. Inside the mess hall that evening, the air shimmered with heat. A fan turned lazily overhead. The long tables were full, the sound of chatter mixing with the clink of cutlery. On the menu again, spam and eggs, thick bread, apple slices. It had become a ritual now, something comforting in its sameness. Yet tonight felt different. Something invisible stirred beneath the surface, like the air before a summer storm. Sergeant Mills entered carrying a large box, his sleeves rolled up, face red from the kitchen's heat. He set it on the counter with a thud. "Special delivery," he announced. The interpreter translated, and the room fell silent. He opened the box and began handing out tins, small, square, silver, each stamped with bold letters. Spam. 1 tin for every woman. The reaction was instant. Some stared as if he'd handed them gold. Others laughed awkwardly, not sure if it was a gift or a joke. Liesel turned the tin over in her hands, running her thumb along the smooth metal. "For us?" she asked in English. Mills nodded. "You helped in the fields. Call it payment." Anneliese whispered, "They pay us with their food." Greta frowned, clutching her tin like a weapon. "It's charity." But Liesel only smiled. "No," she said softly. "It's peace." That night, under a pale moon, the women gathered outside behind the barracks. Someone had managed to borrow a pan and a bit of lard from the kitchen. They lit a small fire in a tin barrel, shielding it with their bodies from the wind. The camp was quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the occasional shout of a distant guard. Liesel opened her tin first, slicing through the lid with a dull knife. The smell rose instantly, salty, familiar, comforting. She cut it into pieces and dropped them into the pan. The fat hissed and popped, spitting little sparks of light. The women leaned closer, mesmerized. It wasn't just cooking. It was remembrance. Anneliese began to hum again. Greta sat with her arms around her knees, staring into the fire. The reflection flickered across her face, softening the years that war had carved into her. "Back home," she whispered, "we'd kill for a potato. Now look at us, cooking like old times." Liesel stirred the pan gently. "Not like old times," she said. "Better. No one's afraid here. When the meat browned, they divided it carefully among themselves, each taking a piece no bigger than a finger. They ate slowly, savoring every bite. The grease coated their lips, the warmth filled their bellies. For a moment, silence fell over the group, deep, reverent, like prayer. Tears came easily, though no one spoke of why. Some cried for their ruined cities, others for lost brothers, others simply for the relief of feeling full. In the distance, a harmonica began to play, soft, uncertain notes drifting from the American barracks. It was a simple tune, melancholy but gentle. Liesel recognized the shape of it, even if she didn't know the song. She stood, still chewing, and looked toward the sound. Through the fence, she saw Sergeant Mills sitting on the steps of the mess hall, harmonica in hand. When he noticed her watching, he nodded once, never breaking the melody. The music carried over the wire, settling between them like shared smoke. For a long time, neither side moved. The women sat beside the dying fire, and the men listened from their post. There were no words, no demands, only the quiet acknowledgment that the war between them had thinned into something fragile and human. Later, as the women returned to their bunks, Greta lagged behind. She looked back at the tin still warm in her hands. "You think we'll ever tell our families?" she asked. Liesel smiled faintly. "Tell them what?" "That we cried over American food." Liesel's smile deepened. "No. We'll tell them we tasted peace." When the lights went out, the night was clear. Fireflies floated through the grass beyond the fence, glowing softly like drifting embers. Anneliese whispered from the bunk below, "Do you think they forgive us?" Liesel thought for a long time before answering. "I don't know if forgiveness is the word," she said. "Maybe it's something smaller. Like when you're hungry and someone feeds you, and for a little while, you stop feeling like an enemy." The generator hummed. Someone laughed faintly in their sleep. The narrator would end it there, on that quiet paradox of war, that victory didn't just come from power but from mercy, that sometimes the smallest act, a meal, a smile, a greasy miracle from a tin, could undo years of hatred faster than any army. Years later, many of these women would return home and speak not of battles, but of breakfast. Diaries found in the 1950s carried the same memory written again and again. "The first time I tasted peace, it came from a can. And though the fences came down and the flags changed, that taste lingered in memory, a simple, salty truth that outlived the war itself." If this story touched you, if it reminded you that even in war, kindness survives, like the video, share it with someone who believes in small mercies, and subscribe for more forgotten stories of humanity that outshone the battlefield.